back, everyone. This is your host, Connor Firmender, CEO and co-founder of Fieldr. I appreciate you all tuning in this fine afternoon or morning, whenever you happen to be listening to this. This afternoon, we're bringing you episode 7, Early Stage Business Ideas, featuring Christopher Littel. Actually, Chris is an old professor of mine from Florida Gulf Coast University. But before we get into his well-respectable introduction, let's just dive into a little bit of a focus on what we'll be reviewing in this podcast. We're going to be taking a step back from COVID-19, the whole crisis situation going on. Chris and I, we're just going to dive into the early stages of starting a business for all of our young entrepreneur listeners. The primary focus will be on phasing out a new business concept idea, most likely, again, for all of you young student entrepreneurs. Chris has experience in educating undergraduates on entrepreneurship and business management, and will share a few Fieldr Academy tips to help shape the path for those looking to get started on their idea. A little fun fact, actually. Chris, I mentioned, he was a professor at FGCU. He was the professor that was, running my final semester at FGCU when I incubated Fieldr. So we'll definitely dive into a lot of that. But without further ado, Chris Littel is a seasoned high-performance business executive, consultant, entrepreneur, and educator. Founder and CEO of MedInform, Chris works with early-stage entrepreneurs and companies in the life science industry while also being an accredited investor. He is also currently a lecturer for Entrepreneurship and Management at the Poole School of Management at NC State University. But prior to NC State, Chris actually taught at FGCU School of Entrepreneurship, and lo and behold, I mentioned, he was my final semester's professor. Chris has over 25 years of progressive leadership experience in the medtech sector, including 16 years at Johnson & Johnson and 5 years with 3 startup companies. Prior to his private sector career, Chris served for over 15 years as an officer in the U.S. Army and served in combat and operational roles in the U.S., Asia, and Europe, as well as other honorable recognitions and assignments. A true man of impact, Chris is also married with 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Chris enjoys an occasional round of golf, reading, and travel, and of course, spending time with his family. So, Chris, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on our episode this afternoon.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So, we were just having a thorough conversation, obviously, before we started recording. But for all of our listeners, we'd love just to have you touch on your time at FGCU, and even just I think it was the year and a half you were there, and favor the final class that we had together, because that was probably my favorite.
We will, Connor. When I went to FGCU, I've been at the Kelly School in Indiana, but I moved to Florida. I had a place there. And I taught to the director, Dr. Kawanui, for a couple of years, because FGCU has a program that really punches above its weight. They were able to create a program, bringing students who really had a knack and desire to learn about entrepreneurship while leveraging their undergrad class in finance, management, engineering. We had kids from all over the university, so it was a real thrill. And one of the classes I taught with Connor, I taught a venture capital class that Connor was in the fall, and we called the New Venture Lab. And one of the things we'll talk about is, how do you learn about entrepreneurship? Well, it is a practice. It's not a theory, but we used a book in that startup called the Startup Checklist, which is written by a guy named David Rose. I've met him in New York. He's a chairman of New York Angels, and it's a 25-step checklist on how to get the startup started, right? Once you have an idea.
Got mine right.
Some other things that are important about, the venture, like financing. She used a book called Venture Deals, a really good kind of quasi-financial book. In that lab, students work with the professor and the teams to create an idea. What I love about the class is it's experiential, it's practical. Students have to find an idea. We give them the frameworks for that, like the Lean Startup, which they've learned in the earlier classes, like Eric Rees, his classic textbook. The book called Scaling Lean, Ash Moran, who's kind of taken Lean Startup method a little more. Ash he's got some good videos on YouTube. We talk about that. But anyway, it goes from concept to inception using a product called Live Plan. They build a business plan in segments, and we bring mentors in. And I always get inspired when students have an idea. I do the same thing at the Kelly School. I'm doing here at NC State. If I see a team has this really cool idea, I said, you should take this out or take it into the Runway program, which is our kind of incubator program at Florida Gulf Coast. We have one here at NC State called the Entrepreneurship Clinic. It's exactly the same model. So I think that learning is that students have ideas they can take out. It's high risk. Most entrepreneurs start usually in their late 30s, early 40s. That's what I did. I was 40 when I started my own business on the side. There's never a better time to start a new business. In a recession, there's more creation, innovation in down times and good times because it forces folks to find a way to survive. And so that's kind of like my take on the class. And Connor and his co-founder Natalie created a great idea. And this is only what? It was a year ago. And they've
Yeah,
already got customers.
just a year. Yeah, we're now breaching literally a year before, from January. I'll never forget, just in the beginning of January when you posed like the assignment, like this is the assignment you're working on, you're pretty much incubating an idea through the semester. And I had that, early stage idea for Fieldr, and then, brought it through the semester, and then graduated in May of 2019. So about a year ago by now. And a year later, after just, initially being an assignment in incubator, here's now a real company, of course. And you're a huge part in actually, getting us from just treating it like an assignment to really treating it like a company. I remember Natalie and I, we both had our full-time jobs, kind of all set up, ready to graduate. And that was kind of the direction we were going in. But I remember, it was like, through the last even couple of weeks, you were consistently, like kind of nudging us, like, are you gonna pursue it? Are you gonna pursue it? You should pursue it. And I'm so glad we did, but so on that note, then, you talked about a few books, you talked about experience. I want to settle this now. It's always been a kind of an argument, and very two-sided. Do you think that you can teach entrepreneurship? Is it truly taught, or is it rather just a lot of lessons learned, experiences, and a foundation that a needed like the needed to do's? You need to, of course, register your company, in Sunbiz if you're in Florida. Like the very foundational, critical stuff that can be taught because that's concrete. But I feel like so much of it is experience that can you really even teach true entrepreneurship?
The answer is yes, and not yes, but yes, and you have to have some other tools. So I came on entrepreneurship kind of late in life. I did it on the side in my early 40s. Finished my corporate career, went to startups because I was ready to start something on my own. I could take a risk because my kids were older. Ran 2 startups in Silicon Valley and Chicago. And then I got offered to teach entrepreneurship at Cal in Indiana, #1 program in the country. And I had no idea what that was. I've been doing it. So I jumped in the classroom, and because I had practical experience, it's not about telling stories. I was teaching MBAs and undergraduates. I said, I need to learn this a little bit more. So I started reading books like the originals. There are some good books, some textbooks. We'll talk about this one because this book by Adam Grant's about Warby Parker, where my son works, where innovators are often not risk takers. They're risk averse. But you have to learn entrepreneurship first. It can't be learned. It's a practice. Back in the 20s, 100 years ago, we thought the great man theory, Alfred Sloan at GM, Henry Ford at Ford, Thomas Edison, you know what? They had all failed before they came to their idea on how to build a company. Edison, a lot of patents, but he created Westinghouse and General Electric. He wasn't a great business guy, but good inventor. Alfred Sloan, Henry Ford, and beyond them, Mr. Watson started IBM. They had taken their experience and then gone in to start a company. And when the venture capital era happened in the 60s, 70s, companies like Digital Equipment and large mainframe companies in the Silicon Valley started, then the wave of the 90s. So we thought strategists and big companies were the incubators of innovation. They weren't. These high risk takers like Andy Grove of Intel, who took Gordon Moore and left Fairchild to start the microprocessor company called Intel back in the late 60s. The third wave was really the 90s when we already had Microsoft, we had Steve Jobs, the early days of the internet. We found out that entrepreneurship was a practice. It's a mindset. It's not a theory. There's theory. It's not a great man theory. It's not a strategy approach. It is a practice. It's a mindset. And I'll mention this one book before we go on called Entrepreneurship. I just co-authored a book that's free to you. I'll give Connor the link, but it's openstacks.org. They make free books in business available to students. It just got published in January. It's 17 chapters. It's a great book. It's a how-to on entrepreneurship. It starts with what is entrepreneurship and what's an entrepreneur. They believe there are 4 kinds. I won't go through that detail, but it is a mindset. So the book goes through how do you become an entrepreneur? How do you learn that practice? You don't need to read a bit of textbook. You can read this book and a few others I've mentioned, but you have to have the ability and the passion. You have to have an idea that's worth pursuing.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you just said in your standpoint of the fact that, yes, you can teach it. And of course, stemming from the pioneers of entrepreneurship, like you mentioned, as time went on, as experience got collected, it's those findings and the practices that kind of have been bundled up into what the teachings are. So I agree with you. And on the topic of books, I'm reading, I'm not reading, I read Entrepreneurial Leap, Gino Wickman, a huge recommendation that I'll be adding the link to this as well. This is great for early stage entrepreneurs. According to this book, according to Gino Wickman, the 6 must-have characteristics, for the true nature of an entrepreneur. Number 1 through number 6: visionary, passionate, problem solver, driven, risk taker, and responsible. Those are the 6 key characteristics that, according to Gino Wickman, every true entrepreneur will naturally have, and what they must, just I truly build that foundation on.
Mhm.
Great,
Yep.
great book.
I'd add one word to that, and that'd be adaptable. They have to be adaptable. They have to
Adaptable.
know, they have to know when to pivot. The old quote about Steve Jobs was, somebody asked Steve Jobs, what's the difference between an entrepreneur who fails and one who succeeds? And Steve says, the big difference is the ones that succeed never gave up. So you can call that persistence, tenacity. It's not willful blindness, but eventually you have to know when to shut things down. But you have to be a little bit adaptable and know when to pivot and what to pivot to.
Yep. Yep. Steve Jobs, he has I know exactly what quote you're talking about. As a matter of fact, I included that in the book that I'm writing right now. Which, by the way, not sure if I had ever mentioned that to you. I'm wrapping up my first book, my first publication. Yeah.
Going to get published, yeah.
Yeah.
Get on the scoreboard.
Yeah. All right. So, we're talking about student entrepreneurs pretty much, early stage entrepreneurs with all these different these book resources, classes. For all those student entrepreneurs, you've been at Kelly, you've been at FGCU, you're now at NC State. What are some of the recommended, whether they're core classes, electives, regardless if the school has a major or not? What are some great classes that a student can pick up?
You got to get a core class in marketing. Which if you do an intro class to entrepreneurship, which I teach as well, and they have a good one down at FGC, a real good one, ENT 1000, 2000, and those are often general curriculum classes. You give the building blocks of entrepreneurship, but it's not enough. But marketing is really the core of everything that you know. If you do a good marketing class, even digital or analytics, but some fundamental marketing class you can take, you should get some knowledge about finance, not so much accounting. The one I taught with Tim Curry, who's an angel fund director in Florida, that's a little more deep, getting into cap tables and term sheets, but some course related to finance. Now, a lot of internship programs have that as a required class, like at FGCU. So some finance, some marketing. I wouldn't say operations, but you should take some management classes if they're good. Those are the cores, because if you have that knowledge, if you haven't been outside yet, they become useful. They teach you analytics, problem solving, critical thinking. So I teach a lot of cases. We did cases at my other class at FGCU. So you learn how to problem solve and become analytical and always question things. And so I think those kind of 3 areas, of course, if you do entrepreneurship at a higher level, like at the Venture Lab, those will all come into the class itself. But you have to some background in it would help.
Right. I agree. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with the marketing one, especially. I was having this similar conversation not too long ago. And it was with a student who wasn't taking the degree in entrepreneurship. I'm not even sure if they have the minor in it, but they're interested at one point in starting their own company, sooner than later. And so kind of just asked for this recommendation, what classes can I take, knowing that I'm not taking the degree, but I want to supplement that, those teachings with something related to entrepreneurship. And yeah, that was one of my first piece of advice was marketing, without a doubt, marketing, being able to just build a brand, a recognizable brand, can definitely carry someone a long way for sure. Those are definitely the core classes, obviously the necessity of the core, needed classes for entrepreneurship. But, when you mentioned Steve Jobs, that just made me think of actually something, the outlier kind of classes that it was, I think, it was a calligraphy class that Steve Jobs had taken when he was a drop in. So he dropped out of college and then would drop in. I'm sure you're aware of the story. He would drop into different classes that he just wanted to sit in on and the teachers would let him. And it was a calligraphy class that was an origin to really his inspiration behind the fine just details and modern interface of what he eventually built into the Macintosh.
That's exactly right, because in the book, if you got to read any book, read Adam Grant's book called Innovators. in that book, he talks about how Nobel Prize winners, if you want to be creative, creativity is not a natural talent. I'm not creative, but in order to really build other skills, like Connor was saying, learn a piano
Yeah.
or learn how to play jazz or learn some other skill outside your core. So some of the creative just experience, because experiential learning is what we talk about in this class. About a third Nobel Prize winners had some other activity. They learned calligraphy or dance or piano or similar. Well, I always say learn Python. In this day and age, learn a computer language. Not to be a coder, but one of my case studies about Jamie Lang, who now works at Slack. She had a degree in English at Wesleyan, had no really technical skills. She got hired by Etsy, which is now public. Etsy's this two-sided model, and was doing just answering customer service calls. So she learned how to deal with customers, and eventually got hired by Slack in their content development area. Slack, this is like 5 years ago. Slack is now worth about $10 billion. It's thriving in this pandemic, and now she's a director. And she goes, look, when you get an opportunity like this, take it. But she taught herself Python, which helped her become much more capable once she got to Slack. So I think something new you learn, I'm not saying learn Python or COBOL or some other computer language, but something like that, and it can be done cheaply.
Yeah.
Coursera, Khan Academy, you can get a lot of these skills on your own. So you have to find your own, but there's a lot of stuff that's low cost or no cost.
Yep. Yep. I agree. Yep. Puts you in that creative environment. Yep. I absolutely agree. All right. So on the topic of resources then, I learned this in class. So yeah, this is definitely something that you can definitely consider. I learned, the business model canvas. Huge resource that had gotten both of my startups, Fieldr included, to the positions that they've gotten to, was having that as such a go-to, such a reliable foundation to even getting started. Has it, I would love to maybe hear other success stories, or how it's helped other students that you've come across, knowing you've been the one to introduce it and you've been the one to see your students evolve, because of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to mention Steve Blank. Steve Blank was kind of like the brainchild behind the Lean Startup. Eric Ries was a student. Steve had done 7 startups in Silicon Valley in tech. He didn't know what entrepreneurship was, so he coined the term Lean Startup. And the canvas became kind of like it's a blueprint, it's an inventory, but it's not the way to get to your business model. So it's an enabler. So there's a lot of debate whether the canvas is even worth doing. I tell my students, even MBAs, it's worth doing because it gets you to articulate the value creation side of your idea, the value delivery, right? So it's 9 blocks. There's another, there's a value prop canvas, which is another book these guys wrote. They wrote the book called Business Model Canvas, or Business Model Generation. So Alexander Osterweiler, who's in Europe, was also a student of Ries. So between the canvas and what comes after, which is really I call it a concept statement, or your venture canvas. So that's a building block, but it's not enough. You got to take that and then move it into a business model sort of version of that, and then your revenue model. You do talk about revenue streams in the canvas, but you've got to take it a little further. It only helps you crystallize kind of what the idea is with a value prop, segments, revenue streams, channels, right? The creation side, delivery is important, right? How do you resource the model? How do you deliver the model? Do you need partnerships? So it says help you kind of crystallize as a laydown. That's why I call it blueprint. It's canvas.
Yeah.
It's not an actionable document, really.
Right. A framework. I like to refer to it as it's a beautiful kind of one-page framework that
Yeah.
the very high.
And you can do a canvas. You can do more than one. So if you go to, there's another book I'd recommend, but you can actually iterate on the canvas. You can create 3 or 4 off of that canvas. It might be another revenue stream. It might be another product idea, the service part of the product. So that's why I say you probably need to do more than that to really get things further along quickly. But it is a good place to start.
Yeah. And okay, so let's take a couple steps forward then. You talked about phasing out that canvas into something much more tangible. In that whole early stage, just realm of things is your MVP, your minimum viable product. And to reiterate that for all of our listeners who don't know what an MVP is, because that's what we'll refer to it as here now. MVP, minimum viable product. To give my definition, I'll pass it over to you. I've been taught and have understood it as the very, very first, frankly, rough version of your service or product that is viable for your hopeful customers, for your initial early adopters, but is minimal in the sense of cost, minimal of time and effort put into building it. It's really what can get you, just get those feet off the ground, get your product service into the hands of users. to start collecting that feedback, to start phasing out and shaping that MVP into something much more robust.
Right.
But would love for you to take it away, because again, such a huge concept that we abided by, that we didn't just jump into things. We didn't, for both VIX Entertainment and especially for Fieldr, we didn't just dump in tens of thousands into development. We had this beautiful idea for an app or website, but we didn't just go from 0 to 100 and dump in 10, 15, $20,000 right away, right? We started very small and proved that need, that the problem was in the community, and that we offered the solution to it, and then built from there. But go ahead and take it away.
Well, so just to be clear, this whole idea started with the Japanese in the 80s when they started to build quality circles and try to improve their process. So lean became things like Six Sigma. So the lean idea we borrowed from the Japanese from their quality circles, harvesting the creativity of their own employees, but it eventually led to a revelation with Eric and with Steve Blank that, the lean startup is lean because you go quickly, you learn fast, so you don't spend a lot of money and time. You don't waste money and time. You don't build a website like Zappos. They build a storefront and bought shoes from retail stores, put them on the storefront, 10 varieties, 5 sizes, and you validate that. That was their MVP, right? So the MVP, it has to be viable. So viable means has a possibility of succeeding. Feasibility means has a probability of succeeding. Viability is a test you do all the way through the business's life. We're viable at pre-launch. We're viable at launch. You're constantly challenging your viability. So the minimum means, whatever it takes to get some feedback. Could be a pilot launch, could be a face-to-face survey. You put that out on the internet, cheaply through your own e-commerce site, Shopify. The good news is that you can do these MVPs now real easily with the internet and with e-commerce capabilities. One of my students did a nut bar called Blake, seed-based nut bar. He launched it through the internet, gave some capital, proved the MVP. Now he's in retail stores with a nutrition bar. So I guess the important thing is it's 3 words you got to remember. Build the MVP. Once you get some early validation, but not product market fit or customer validation or traction, build, test, and learn. The test could be a pilot launch. It could be like Fieldr did through if you will, through an app-based outreach, creating awareness, and then learn what went well, what didn't go well. You got to find out, you got to get more insights. So it's a loop. You do that loop more, you may do it 4 or 5 times, depending on the market, the segments. Is it a product or a service or a SaaS model? And so it may take you 6 months to a year, but that's fast. That's a fast cycle. And once you're ready, you've got enough information, not perfect information. The MVP becomes a product or service that you launch. Now, again, you may launch in the pilot because you're still trying to get data to say, can I scale it? That's the idea of scaling lean. When you go past that, that's when Ash talks about, hey, scale it. He calls that the customer factory. So how do you go from awareness to activation, to purchase or repurchase, referral, retention? Those all come later. But the basic part is the MVP. Build, test, learn.
Yeah, I get that was all beautiful. I get asked quite often from students, of course, a lot of at FGCU, what did our MVP look like? How much did it cost? How long did it take you to find the right developer? So on and so forth. I would love to share that right now, for all of our listeners, to maybe hopefully answer a lot of those questions. And this is honestly probably, I'm not even sure if we ever really entirely expressed this to you, Chris, how we kind of, what it looked like after we left your class in May. We initially had collected a lot of proposals, of course, to have this website built, this very robust website built. We had these features we wanted. We had all this good jazz that it was going to be doing all these great things right away. Very quickly realized from getting proposals from a few different web developers, they're in the in the high thousands, low tens of thousands. Quickly realized that that's not the position we're in right now. We need to budget for an MVP, and that we were expecting a solid cost between $500 to $1,000. We were comfortable with putting out for something that we needed built, which is still very much a custom website. But again, not dumping out $5,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, whatever it be, into our MVP. So but we didn't know what website, builder we were going to use, right? We knew Squarespace, Shopify, right? Those were just not capable of doing what our service needed to do, our platform needed to do for our users. And so that's why those proposals were so high, because there was a lot of native development involved. So what we had done is we scaled that all the way back, our MVP idea all the way back from native website to maybe we just do prototypes, essentially, like have all the wireframes, have the prototypes built, and show what the user experience would look like. Try to raise some capital that way, and try to just spark user feedback that way by having these prototypes with the user experience kind of flow. Also then realize, okay, maybe that's scaled back far too much. I'm sure it wouldn't cost us a lot of money, but we would not collect. It wouldn't be quite an MVP. It wouldn't be quite enough to collect valuable feedback. At the end of the day, it wouldn't be enough to collect valuable feedback is really what I'm getting at. So we had to find that happy medium, and what we ended up settling on was a WordPress site. Was utilizing WordPress. We knew it would take some additional plugins just to really get to the exact services that we need to offer, just to be a little bit more robust than just a basic website, than basic WordPress build. And that's what we ended up settling on. And we ended up, interviewing 50 different developers. I think we spoke to a ton of developers here locally in Southwest Florida, all over the country, internationally. And we ended up settling on a lead developer who's based in Canada. He's a full stack developer, has 15 years of experience using WordPress. And this is the best kicker. This is probably going to be a huge resource for all of you listeners out there, is we found this developer through Upwork. So we interviewed a lot through Upwork, talked to a lot just out in the community through our network, but we ended up finding our developer on Upwork. And I highly recommend that website to early stage entrepreneurs, to anyone. Honestly, Upwork is great for every stage of entrepreneurship, because there's just so many services that are available on there. But in the sense of having a website built, maybe your first app built, or whatever it be, even wireframing and prototyping, there are so many experts on Upwork, so many freelance experts on Upwork, that I highly encourage taking advantage of that new gig economy. There's the short term, lesser cost based work. But yeah,
And that's a great point, because David covers it in his book, The Startup Checklist. There's so many free resources, low cost. Upwork is one. You've got Wix, Squarespace, WordPress for website design. You can do it yourself. It's also inexpensive. Using Sightly, and Sightly is free for the first 3 users for CRM, customer relationship management. It's great to manage contacts. You've got Slack as for internal project development and communications. You don't have to spend a lot of money on Microsoft Teams. So you got all these tools now, even QuickBooks for if you have to have an accounting thing. These are so low cost, and you can learn them in school. QuickBooks was taught in one of the classes at FGCU. So you can learn so much in 2 years if you get the right idea, and you can spend very little money to get the MVP and prototype these ideas to quickly get to go no good decisions.
Yeah. And I mean, we just listed so many tools alone right there. For e-commerce, definitely I suggest the Shopify, and I'm sure you can attest to that as well for e-commerce. Basic design websites, Squarespace is great, Wix is great, WordPress obviously. And another CRM we actually use is HubSpot. We just use their free CRM. They have plenty of amazing paid features, but we're able to utilize that free version for the CRM. There's just so many other free resources. Slack, you mentioned. Trello is a huge one. Trello has been the operation schedule, you can say, to Fieldr. It's where we have our full kind of workflow and breakdown for development, breakdown for all of marketing and operations, to-dos and checklists, and you can even sync with Google Drive too. So
Trello's very good. So is Unsauer. Again, these are low-cost project management tools. Yeah. And I was just getting to think about the last thing I mentioned on top of that was around e-commerce. So you got Shopify. Phone by Amazon is good. It's not cheap. You got a product. They all do all the warehousing, returns, management. That's what Blake did till he got into retail. So it's a bridge. So you have so many more resources. You just have to choose wisely.
Yeah.
Choose wisely and make sure you plan that really well.
Yeah. There's so many, as we just listed, and to kind of put the cherry on top, I believe you introduced this software to us as well. LivePlan. You mentioned this earlier in our recording. LivePlan was great. And go. I would love for you to, I guess, just maybe express your advocacy for it, or if you continue to use it.
Yeah, I've used 2 tools. One at Kelly, we use one called it's MIT guys. It's not as good as LivePlan, because the other one I kind of had. It's a business planning, not simulation, but LivePlan to build a plan, and they've got sample plans. So LivePlan, you can probably get a student version for close to free, and you can build a business plan with drop downs, build your cost models, build your marketing plans. It's got prompt questions. It's very user friendly. The guys there are out of Palo Alto, so Live Plan's used in a lot of schools. I found it I didn't use it before I came to FTCU. I found it very useful for the students. I could teach it. It's all in the cloud, all web enabled. So when you check out liveplan.com, you can see if they've got a user, like a demo tool you can use for free for a couple of days. And we've got some real examples in the Live Plan space. Yeah, good tool.
Yeah, definitely helpful for us. Yeah, I remember, it even helped spit out some spreadsheets too. You input your numbers. Yep. So love it. Help kind of get the financial statements initially built. All right. Well, again, this podcast recording, this was heavily geared towards our students, our younger audience. So we know that this whole pandemic, the situation is going on. Just bringing this into the conversation here for a second. Do you have any words of encouragement, or how do you suggest young entrepreneurs, students can still prepare to launch while also attending school or balancing a full-time job? So I know there's a lot going on. That's my point. There's a lot going on. Students are attending school. Maybe they have a full-time job in the mix as well. I know I had to go through it, but I would love for you, I guess, from your expert, viewpoint, how can students prepare to launch and still move forward with everything else going on as well?
Yeah, I ask my students a lot this, Connor, in school. It's like, is it better to go to a startup or a big company at first? Well, startup, you learn a lot. You don't get paid very much, but you learn a lot. You get a lot of responsibility at a younger age. I always talk about my student from Kelly, Kimberly, who went on Glassdoor. She found a job with a startup, learned a lot. They went through Series B. It was called Viral Gains, curated video and advertising. Went to Chicago. She's now at another startup. So you can do that route or go with a big company at Gartner, or I wouldn't say Hertz having some challenges, but go work for a company and learn some domain knowledge, okay? And you may wait. You may go get an MBA and then go back. The guys here, Warby Parker, Adam Grant was their professor. He turned them down for investing because they didn't know anything about the eyeglass business. If you know Warby is a eyeglass business out of New York. They started while they were still in school. And their MVP was they were actually getting calls on the line. They built a website. They'd send 5 frames for free, try them on. So they became very, that was a validation. And their professors didn't believe them because they didn't know anything about the eyeglass business. They did research. That's anything about originals. You got to get some domain knowledge. So most people get an idea at their current job. They may have it as a student like Connor did. That's unusual. So get some experience, find something you really like, something that you can improve on. Most entrepreneurs start because they get really fed up with something. Like Reed Hastings at Netflix. He got fed up with Blockbuster and the late fees. Steve Jobs, he actually worked at Atari for a while, and he got fed up with what he saw with computers. He bought an Altair and demoed it with HP, and they said no. So it's all about what makes you want to start a business. You can do a lot while you're still in school. The guys at Warby, they validated because people forgot once they learned and did market research and went, there was only one company in eyeglassware that dominated the supply side and the brand side, all their licenses with like Prada. That's why glasses cost $600. They found a pricing model with their professors. They launched it in school, but they were at MBA schools. They were getting those kinds of knowledge that I talked about with Connor, and there were 4 of them, not just one. There are 4 of them with common skills. They still have 2 left as co-CEOs. One went up to start Harry Shave Club. So you can get the tools and knowledge in school, and you can incubate the idea. The question's going to be, do I take it out and keep incubating it and then launch it? When I said to that at Kelly, he came to Gartner in Florida. We kept talking about his idea. He still got the idea going. So pulling the trigger is the hard part. You have to get money. You've got to get advisors. It's going to be a timing issue. When you're ready to take that leap, you're going to have to take it when you're younger. You have no kids, no mortgage. You may or may not have some debt. So when you can take that risk is really, if you can get some validation of the idea and get the MVP, that's kind of the trigger. So I say that's kind of the words of wisdom is you can't launch it from school, or when you get out of school. I got a bunch of kids here doing it, thinking about it. But I also say, look, you get a job with pay and benefits, you'll have time. You're not working 7 days a week. If you have the discipline to work at night and weekends and nurture it, keep working it, keep nurturing it, and then find the time to launch it. Once you have enough domain knowledge, you must have some knowledge of the industry. Mm-hmm. That's what the guys at Google would say. They're getting PhDs. Sergey and his co-founder said, "If we can't get jobs, this whole search thing, it's gone. We got to get jobs in computer science." And they launched Google in the face of 5 competitors. They had Lycos and 5 of the search engines. People forget they were already out there. They just had a better solution. That's the other thing. You can innovate on anything. You can innovate on coffee. I wouldn't say start a coffee shop. That's a lifestyle business. But hey, I had some kids down there, that are into fishing. and they had an idea for a special recyclable tackle box. Those can work as a niche business. So are you going for a niche and down a niche business, or are you going for $1 billion industry? That's the other thing. So I suggest as well as Connor's videos, if you go to Y Combinator or Techstars, there's some great videos to watch about how do investors look at ideas, how they assess ideas, how they assess the management team, how they assess the market potential. So there's some good videos to learn as well that give you more than just the classroom talks.
That's great. You brought up a good point. A lot of great points. Y Combinator went through the fall 2019 startup school for Y Combinator. That was such a great experience. A lot of their videos are still accessible now. You can find on their YouTube channel. So I encourage all of our listeners to check out Y Combinator's all their videos. Techstars you mentioned for sure, and to I guess offer just my experience. And the whole topic of full-time job, pursuing your startup while in school, what really played a huge benefit for me was kind of merging that full-time job experience while still making money while in school, with the full-time job being a startup that was kind of molding into a small business at the time. So it was that for 2.5 years that was giving me just raw business experience, ups and downs, literally going from the company was facing bankruptcy, and we went through, cutting 2/3 of the staff to reshaping the entire pricing model, saving it from bankruptcy and driving it to profitability in over 2
Yeah, that was where the brand or where
where
the
the
fund, yeah.
I ended up bringing over $1 million in sales under my role, brought it from bankruptcy to profitability. And it was just this raw experience that it gave me such a strong sense of what it took to, run a startup and what to expect. And a lot of just that overall experience that then put me in a very comfortable position as I was finishing school. And of course it wasn't just finishing school, let me quit and hope Fieldr works out. We launched Fieldr and it was picking up traction, and we're getting so much attention that it was, I was finding myself decommitted and unavailable at very important times that Fieldr needed me. And so it was a decision that I had to make for Fieldr. Do I commit myself to something that there's huge opportunity lying, or do I just?
Yeah, we call that we call that an action forcing mechanism, right? You had to make that call. Yeah. So you got to be decisive. So I say, the last thing I'd say is that with students, I tell them, look, I would avoid, if you have an idea for business, I would avoid restaurants. And you can see now why I don't like restaurants or apps. Apps are a dime a dozen, but the app could be part of the solution. Right. You need some kind of sort of online presence because that's cheap. It can be effective. Let's say I'm going to create the best app for animal lovers. Okay. Two-sided models work great if both sides can work. Right. And so think about the business model. Let's start with the canvas, go to the business venture model, then the revenue model. How do you monetize that? Because you can't generate cash and then self-fund your startup. You can only raise money once, usually, or twice. Friends and family, angels, bank loans, whatever. So the financing part is really important. So that's the financial acumen is important. But at the end of the day, make sure you choose that idea and you work on it for a while to make it really successful. Yeah. There's no better time to start a business than now. That's my opinion. Yeah. And entrepreneurs are getting younger. They were 40 when I was 40. Now they're getting younger because I think kids now have been trained, at least in high school even, about business literacy, startups. A lot of people now want to be mentors. A lot of mentors in Florida. We have mentors here. They're here all year round. So I'd say, find a mentor too that might know about the industry you're thinking about.
Yep. Huge fan. Yeah. NAF Academy stands out as, a program that is heavily involved in high school business literacy and entrepreneurship, financial literacy. You even mentioned before, I like how you said, starting the business now, there's no better time than now, but especially for our younger listeners who aren't married, don't have children, right? They don't have they don't have mortgages. They don't have those types of responsibilities that, those are your responsibilities. You're stuck with them, right? Not in a bad way, but you're just not in that position right now.
You don't have cost of starting a business. Yeah, your smartphone can be a computer. I mean, the technology now is so cheap. Get a laptop for $400. Get a smartphone for $200. You have internet access everywhere for free. So all those building blocks are cheap, but you still have to use your brain, right? And you have to get other folks in the boat. So it's a lot of work. I'm saying the failure rate for startups is still pretty high. Yeah. So understand, it's because the number one reason startups fail, I've told this to Connor, number one reason that startups fail, and there are 30. It wasn't the team. Well, that's the reason. It wasn't they ran out of cash. That's the big reason. there was no need for their product. Number one, you would think that you would build the MVP later. It's like hammer looking for a nail. They build this product because they think, oh, I got a much better mousetrap. Unless there's a product market fit or market need, forget it. So think about, I have an idea. Okay. There's a problem, gap in the marketplace. Okay. I have capability, either my own or some others, right? And the third leg of that stool is idea, capability, and unmet need. Those three are the three building blocks, or at least the three criteria to say, well, there is an opportunity. That's why you do these early stage canvases. That's kind of, use that as another maybe screening tool.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, on that note, I think that was definitely plenty of information for our young listeners and our young entrepreneurs to take with and start taking action on. But yeah, and just to wrap it up, Chris, would love you just to express, if and how any of our young listeners, our young entrepreneurs can find you, can reach out to you.
Yep. You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Littel, Littel. You can find me my personal email, chris.little43, chris.little43@gmail.com, or through Fieldr. Any questions are always open. I do work full time, but I got lots of extra time. I love working with students because I got the startup late in life, and I want students are going to save this world. The Confidence Foundation said who's going to save this generation. It's going to be the millennials and those that follow. So if you're between 20 and 30, start a business for the right reason at the right time with the right people.
Perfect.
All right.
And I'll add all those links in there so all listeners didn't get your email, can get your website and your LinkedIn. Perfect. Well, great. I appreciate you coming on, Chris. It was a pleasure and a lot of fun catching up as well.
Thanks, Connor. Good luck with Fieldr.
Absolutely.
You do great.
Bye, everyone. We'll talk to you later.